biggest challenge for Pope John the 23rd in convening this council?
I think the newness of bringing together a whole church in a context, in the world context of the 60s. Now, most of us in here remember the 60s, all right, how turbulent it was. And one of the things that most people don't realize, they think that movements like this start from the top or come from the top, and yet my experience was that the seeds for this council began many decades earlier. The grassroots were beginning to develop. There were questions being raised. And I think when John became Pope, he was sensitive to that, to the movements of the church, which pointed to the need to update. And I think that was the biggest challenge.
And I would say, just to put a disclaimer out there, that there are many, of course, Catholics that were not happy with some of the changes, or maybe even the change itself. And we'll talk about the specifics in the series, like changing, for example, the Latin Mass.
Right.
So some people really liked it, and it's not just the Latin in terms of the language; it's really the structure and the more of high church, service. So,
the one thing we loved about John was his sense of humor. A real gift. Right? If a leader doesn't have a sense of humor, you be careful. All right, because all of a sudden, he or she is going to take everything so seriously. All right, but John was one. He had a sense of a humor which showed his ability to deal with the ambiguities of life. And I know that as part of my life now, later on, I have really come to believe that we don't live in an either-or world. That we live in a world filled with ambiguities, and if we're going to survive, we have to learn how to live with those ambiguities. And John was very, very much aware of that. He said basically, it was so Christ-like to place human persons above ideology. And as soon as I read that again, I thought of what was going on in the world today. And one of Pope Francis's favorite statements is, reality is more important than ideas. Because human beings are more important than ideas. And human beings live and act in reality. All right? They're not some imaginative group. All right? And so I really believe that John, and by temperament, by religious temperament, they were alike. All right.
Right. This is an interesting point, because sometimes it's just the temperament that needs to change for openness. You may not change any of course, your decrees or the creeds or dogmas, but somehow just the spirit, different spirit of a conversation. So also we have to understand that the context of information, the transmission of information, we live now 100 years. The council before that was 100 years earlier, in the mid-1800s. Imagine the change in technology and transmission of information.
Sure. And how to bring, even in the council itself, how to bring a common language to 2,500 bishops who spoke different languages, right? And you're having a speaker speak in his native language, which most of the bishops wouldn't understand, and you've got the simultaneous translations going on. So the whole idea of technology, even in the 60s, was so important for this council to move on. And you had asked me about John and his concerns. I'll kind of finish with this in terms of John. He said, "As I go about my daily work as Pope, I sometimes have to listen with much regret to voices of persons not endowed with too much sense of discretion or measure." He says, "I feel I must disagree with these prophets of gloom who are always forecasting disaster as though the end of the world was at hand."
I think we can learn about this today, too.
Absolutely. All right. Again, you look at the world around us, and regardless of what it is, whether it's politics, religion, anything else, look at how fear is playing into being a primary motivation for people to react and act. All right. And as we said, even on a religious level, fear doesn't come from God. All right. The world, how many times has the world been predicted to end? You know, repent, the end is coming. And, you know, we think we're gods, we know when, and it passes by. Right? We have to keep moving forward, living with the ambiguities, living with human beings, and knowing how to communicate, and communication was one of John's strong points. Right? We have to keep moving ahead. There's going to be disagreements, but the only way you're going to deal with disagreements is by communicating with one another, not by screaming and shouting.
So you can maybe actually say that this whole Second Vatican Council was an exercise in communication.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.